Hey everyone, welcome to Patty Paints Minis. This is my very first video on this channel, and I couldn't think of a better way to kick things off than painting an absolute legend, King Frodd, ruler of the Sons of Bahamut. I'm super excited to share my painting process with you all. We'll be working through skin tones, fur, runes, and all those epic details that make this model such a beast on the table. So grab your brushes, sit back, and let's dive in together. I'm Patty, and this is just the beginning of Patty Paints Minis. So to start off, what I'm doing here is I did kind of a purple undertone and then an orange highlight to kind of just give the model depth. So it helps me kind of plan exactly what I'm doing here. See the lows, the shadows, and then the highlights. And it also has the benefit of giving any of my skin tones that I don't eventually get paint on because they're in the recesses, kind of a, realistic tone. Unfortunately, I didn't record every process in this video. You'll see a little bit of jump cuts here and there just because this is my live stream. It also explains the different aspect ratio of the videos. And unfortunately, I didn't get the skin tone kind of block in painting and the browns as well. If you want to see that process on my next video, I'll have my Kragnos. And that video will show you exactly the process I did. It'll be the same for the skin tones on him. But right now what we're doing here is we're just trying to get these I'm thinking they're kind of like a blue dragon or blue drake skin that they killed up in the mountains. So I thought I'd make like kind of a frost dragon leather. And so I started kind of with a darker blue and a purple undertone. And now I'm just kind of building up those highlights by adding a little bit of white to my airbrush and just trying to hit a little less each time. And when I'm doing these, I try my very darnest not to get paint on the mini, but clearly I got paint on the skin, and so I'm just going back with kind of my pink and brown here to give the dark undertone again. So going through, kind of just fixing my oopsie. There's a lot of this. It's not a big deal. It happens, repainting things that are painted is just part of the process. So that's what's going on here. I'll swap to a kind of the mid-tone here in a second, so you can kind of see exactly what I did with the skin tone throughout the whole video. I do this back and forth quite a bit, so really all it is again, it's the same process. I always start with my shadow, and then I generally will add white to my airbrush or the flesh tone, which is kind of a peach color, and I just keep building back up. So we're just fixing those little mistakes there, and then I'm coming in. The same kind of tone that I'm using for the skin highlight is actually the mid-tone for most of the bone, and so I hit a little bit of the bone. Right now I'm kind of getting the face done. I eventually did a glowing eyeballs and whatnot, but still the mouth and kind of lips needed it. So then what we're working on here is just putting a little more highlights with pure white to make those icicles really pop, make them look like ice, more translucent near the tips. And then I believe I also do his back just a bit here and there. Then again, just bringing in a little more highlight and all the skin tone. When I'm painting, I really try and put as much contrast into the painting as I can. So I like to really push the limits of, making the highs as high as possible and the lows as low as possible. And it's kind of the same process I do with any of the materials, whether it's fur, hair, skin, metal. I'm always trying to push that contrast. So here I'm just reblocking in some of my colors. I wanted a kind of a dark brown undertone for the fur. I'm thinking kind of like a wolf, kind of a white wolf pelt, gray wolf kind of fur. So that's what we're doing here, is just bringing a little more of the highlights in. I would consider this process just blocking in colors still. I know that I have most of the flesh done in the flesh tones, but really that's the easiest part of this model. Whenever I'm using the airbrush, I try and pick the largest surface area, and that'll be the majority of what I airbrush, and then I'll come in with brush painting and whatnot to get those details back in. from the overspray. And really the airbrush is just a really nice tool to get really smooth gradients and to kind of speed up the process here and there. Kind of just highlighting any of the details that I want to bring back out. So the rope and whatnot that's holding all the runes and little knickknacks on him, bringing those colors back up. So now that I'm done with getting most of the airbrush done on the main part of the mini, going back through and I'm trying to put in all my block out colors for the metallics. And there's many ways to do metallics. I personally like to start at black with steel or gold or really any color of metal. I find it a lot easier to start there and then do either a dry brush or an edge highlighting and then adding metallic paints on top. The metallic paints are really powerful, so I try and use them basically as a highlight paint and less like the actual mid-tone. It's really hard to kind of calm down metallic paints once they're... Oh, yep, and that right there, that's when I've realized that I have peeled off a bunch of the skin on the back, but you'll see me fix that later. But as I was saying, the metallic paints are very difficult to tone down once they're on the mini. So like I said, I like to do a black or even a brown for, like, say gold or bronze or copper, or black for steel for the undertone. And then that way I can just edge highlight the portions that will be the brightest with the metallics. So here we are, just putting in all the blocking. I'll be honest, this is the painting experience that I loathe the most. I like doing my washes and I like doing my highlights, but the midtones, not a fan. But I will say it's the foundation of your painting, so the longer you take on this step, the better your result. The more clean you can get your block-ins in, and the more time you take on this step will make your finished product a lot better. So, and really there's no wrong way of doing the painting process. A lot of people ask me on my stream, what's the correct way, right? Do I start with midtones and then add a wash and then a highlight? You can absolutely do it that method. The real true answer is always end with your highlights. You can go mid-tone to wash, or wash and then mid-tone. And when I say wash, I just mean the darkest portion of the mini. On certain things, I'll start with the darkest, like the metallics. I'll always start, basically blacking them out. But in other things like the leather and the skin tone, I generally will paint at the mid-tone and then add in the wash. So that's more or less the main body blocked in. We're going to move on to the feet and arms and weapon. Probably my favorite painting of this whole model was doing the arms and the axe. The amount of detail that the modeler put into those portions, just, fantastic. And as I'm doing this purple and orange gradient, I'm really trying to just plan out exactly what I'm going to paint everything. It's hard to tell exactly what each little doohickey or piece of cloth or leather is until I kind of put this high contrast pre-paint on, this foundation paint. So as I'm painting it, I'm starting to realize, oh, that's kind of a horn there, and that's some fur. That's cool, that's a gauntlet. You start to realize the level of attention that the creator of the model put into it. And I always try and do my best to kind of put color to their vision. I want to make things look as they should, right? So on like the feet and the hands, I realized that he has kind of a cloth texture, some cloth wrappings, and on top of those cloth wrappings, he had kind of a leather texture for his gauntlets, and then on the top of that was the actual armor itself. So I wanted to make sure to disassociate those different portions. And here I'm just blocking in more metallics, things that I wanted to be metal. Again, it's a lot of back and forth, just trying to catch all the spots. You never will. So going through, I'm sure that I could have done more metal on this project here, but I kind of like doing more of a minimalist when I'm doing a tribal character. So when I think of the Sons of Bahamut in my army, I kind of want them to usually use leather, because killing large animals and then creating leather from it is a whole lot easier than using, metal from the humans and trying to mash them together. So that was kind of the idea with this, is really minimal metals, just enough to also break up some of the cloth and leather items on not only his kilt here, but also on his wrists and arms and legs. So again, just going through, blocking in more colors. This is probably the majority of the video. It's not the fun part, but it's definitely necessary to again get that nice quality at the end. As you can tell, I have left the top portion of the model very bright. I'm not going to do a whole lot of highlights below the waist. I like to think of what I call the triangle, the lighting triangle. So when you look at the finished model, I would like the head, from the head to the arms, and if he has, say, a giant axe, like in this one, the top of the axe and the weapon as well will be the brightest portion of the model. It helps to focus the eye kind of into that triangle, where I will put the most amount of time and attention to those details. I find that painting this way is not that difficult. It's just you have to do a little bit of forethought. So right now, just painting in more of the kind of textures, the different kind of browns and the different kind of leathers. I'm trying to use as many different shades as I can to kind of differentiate different leathers. If this was a smaller model, I would definitely use just one color for one leather, But seeing as which the intention of a lot of these model designs, these details on this model, were a multitude of different leathers kind of patched together, I kind of wanted to bring those to the forefront with different textures, different paints. Here I'm blocking in kind of the skin tone mid-tone, so the brown that I painted on below will help to kind of be the undertone. So now I'm building up from my mid-tone here, which is kind of a little bit darker than peach, and then what I've done here is I've just kept the same color in my airbrush and I've added in a pink ink. Now I really love using inks. If you don't have some, I would highly recommend you get some. The nice thing about inks is they are a translucent acrylic paint. So you can add them to any color and it'll give it just a shade in the direction you want. You can see me fixing my oopsie right there. And when they go on, they will go on and change the pigment, but they will leave the undertones. So it's really nice to add them to kind of my base flesh with a little bit of pink, and then I'll add a little bit of white, as you're seeing me do here, and slowly build up that gradient. I'm not an airbrush pro by any means, but I have fought the damn thing long enough to kind of get a good feel for it. If you don't have an airbrush in your collection, a lot of the painting techniques in this video will show you how to do it just with brushwork. You saw me just clean off a couple of the sprues there that I didn't catch on my first go around. So removed those and then added paint to them as well. The important thing when using an airbrush is make sure you have your angle correct. So if you can see, I almost always have the airbrush 90 degrees to the model, especially when I do my highlights, because that's how you catch the raised edges. And long before I started painting this, I kind of did a test fit on King Broad there to kind of show me exactly where the light is going to be hitting the arms, and so that gives me a better idea to kind of pre-paint these. It's really hard to paint models that are separated. I don't do it too often, but with the scale of this model, it was just a lot easier to work with these pieces and be able to hit all the spots that I wanted to before putting them on the model. So, and the reason I generally don't, I usually will only ever paint fully built models, is it's hard to blend those seams together. So if I didn't get the angle just right when painting these, like the exact angle of how the light is hitting it, it comes off as being a little goofy. So here what I have is actually a red ink mixed with a hair of brown. I didn't like that I washed out a lot of those undertones, so I decided to go back and add those in. And again, I'm doing a 90 degree to the opposite way of where the light's going to be hitting. I really like this kind of tone. Skin isn't one color. You'll notice that skin is actually a multitude of different shades and hues depending on the person. Sometimes people even have kind of a blue undertone to their skin. I was going for kind of a really red undertone for him, because he's probably a little cold. And when you're cold, if you're healthy, the blood will rush to the skin. So that's why I did that undertone. And what we're working on now is getting the axe done. This was hands down my favorite piece of painting with the airbrush. Started with a nice blue undertone with a little bit of ink. Then I come through and I'm adding a little bit of white. I'm using a paper towel to mask off the flesh, which actually worked pretty well. I usually don't mask anything off. I just try my best, and if I mess up, I'll just repaint it. So, and what I'm doing here is, again, exactly 90 degrees to the edge. The idea here is not to follow the light, but to actually follow the thinness of the axe. So the thinnest portion of ice is always going to be near translucent. So I was trying to get that effect. I washed out my midtone a little bit too much. So again, I grabbed the blue ink and kind of hit it on the opposite of the edge, and that really gave it a nice ice effect. I was really happy with how that came out. So here we are, just taking the airbrush to block in more colors, because I didn't want to spend a lifetime brush painting my block ins. So just going through, trying to hit all those leather and brown tones as fast as possible. I would say again that about 90% of this video is blocking in colors. So we're just going to go through here and hit everything I want to have be the base color of brown. So now that we got most of our browns put together, we're going to start working on most of the cloth pieces, or anything that's kind of cloth adjacent. This is also pretty much the skin highlight tone, like I said earlier. So I might hit a little bit of the bone with this as well. What I'm doing here is just trying to get that color blocked in. Then later I'll come through and put some contrast paints in, which, if you're not familiar, is a Citadel brand that I'm a huge fan of. What's nice about them is they have kind of a little bit more pigmentation of color than a wash, but they're very fluid-like. I generally will add a little bit of water to them, but the nice thing about them is they do have two different tones once they dry. So it's kind of like painting with two different colors, which is really nice and speeds up a lot of the process. Most of the cloth you see on this was either touched with a little bit of the Skeleton Horde contrast paint, which I also used on the bone as well. And if I didn't use that, then I used my oil washes, which we'll see near the end of the detailing portion of the video. So again, just kind of going through, trying to find all these spots. This is also a nice mid-tone for the fur, so I used it there as well. So yeah, just trying to be as accurate as possible. Again, when you're using the airbrush, it's just inevitable that you're going to get paint on something that you don't want to. So I was just trying my best to hit just the areas that I want. Right there, it kind of bled into the skin, but I knew that my oil wash would hide a lot of this as well. So you can be messy with the airbrush, especially when you're using oil paints. Later in the video, I'll show you exactly what I mean by using oil washes. I have since just pretty much stopped using any acrylic-based washes. The fact that they dry so fast and they really leave you no optionality, but we'll get more into that in the later part of the video. But kind of see that I'm using that same color as the mid-tone for my bones, the kind of antlers on his head. I'm adding a little bit of white and hitting those spots just a little bit more on just the highlight areas. And yeah, that's just what we're doing here. Just more blocking in, basically. So we're going to end up swapping to black here. Whenever you're doing a highly textured model like this, I like to try and paint the lowest surface, if that makes sense, and then work towards the raised surface. So getting the cloth in and then getting the leather in and then finally coming back with the black just kind of helps with being able to get those details in the crevices without worrying about overspray on the upper part of the model or the corners of it. So coming back, I wanted this little middle piece of the staff to be metal, almost as if it's holding the magic of the ice axe. So we're hitting that with black. Again, just hitting whatever I think I'm going to end up painting as metal. Just adding in a little bit of gray here, and I think that's when I begin to go through and hit all of the stone on the model. So, and by stone, I mean I kind of wanted the runes to be etched in stone. So, also helps to kind of give it another different gradient to work with, not just black and browns and then flesh. So now bringing a little bit of gray. So this is just hitting all of the runes, also hitting the fur as well. Just kind of keep bringing in more and more complexity into some of these different materials. So with the fur, I wanted the brown undertone, that little kind of cream color as well, and then I wanted the gray to be right before my highlights. So by doing this, it gives it more 3 dimensions. Fur and hair is never ever one color. It's always reflecting light in different ways. And then when you're talking about animal fur, they clearly have an undercoat, and then they have a kind of the middle of their coat, and then they'll have a top coat. And so I like to try in my painting to recreate life as best as I can. So the different tones you've seen me use on the fur is kind of just building up those different coats. Here, I'm just hitting all of the stone runes, trying to be as accurate as possible. Just trying to hit anything I can find that deserves to be gray. Once I got the mid-tone for all of the gray done, I'm just going to go back through with the airbrush and kind of highlight anything fur related. Hit a little bit of his beard. Kind of went with a gray undertone for the beard so that I could hit it with more white later. And just get, you know, any little piece that I can. A little bit brighter, especially up near his shoulders. Just a little bit of that white. And each time I just add a couple droplets of white into my airbrush. It dilutes the mid-tone, makes it just a gradient higher. And generally I can do that probably 3 or 4 times. And then each time I apply the next coat, I'm always doing just a little bit less than I did before. And then now I'm just going through, hitting anything that needs to have the white block in. So more ropes here and there, a little bit of the bone to bring it back, just blocking in those colors. And the ropes ended up turning out really nice. They're probably my favorite thing to paint, aside from the axe, was the ropes. They have a perfect texture on them, really easy to highlight, and the recesses were really nice to kind of grab those paint. Painted a little bandage on his finger. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be a ring, but I like the idea that it was a little bit of injury. Maybe someone out in the wild stabbed him in the finger. So then grabbing my black again, blocking in the remainder metallics with pure black. Trying my best not to hit anything that I didn't want to. Being real careful. And that should be most of the colors blocked in. And so now we're getting to highlights. Now highlights I really enjoy doing. It's something that I could spend hours and hours and hours on and still find something to, you know, make pop a little bit higher. So like I said, with my metallics, I like to start with a black base and using my metallic paints as the edge highlight. So what I'm trying to do is use them as the least amount as possible. Metal generally only shines when light is hitting it. Other than that, it's kind of gray and dull. So right here, you see me just hitting the raised edges. I'm not too worried about this first round of highlights because I know I'm going to still do a wash on all of this with oils or contrast paints. So I'm just trying to hit areas that I'd like to see have that metallic paint on them. Being very, very minimal here as much as I can. Like I said, the metallic paints are very powerful. If you go a little too heavy-handed, sometimes it just kind of turns into a disco ball of metal. Because how the metallic paints function is they have little tiny itty-bitty flecks of, I would assume, kind of a glitter. But those little flecks, they catch the light all in different areas. So when I use them, I try and only have them hit exactly on the light from the model hitting it. So it's not just shooting light everywhere, kind of messing up my undertones. So this is one of the few times I'll wash with acrylics is on metals. Because you can be pretty accurate with it. And that was Basculinium Gray, I think, from Contrast, from Citadel, the contrast paints. And it does a really nice kind of blending between the black and the aluminum metallic I use from Vallejo. So now what you're seeing is I'm bringing in my gold, and you never want to start at gold. You always want to start with kind of a brownish bronze or copper, right? Because the idea here is that's going to be your gold mid-tone. So you want it to be really warm. And then you'll see me slowly kind of bring up the gradient with an actual gold color. I don't know what that one is off the top of my head, but it's another Citadel gold. And they got like 15 different golds and steels and whatnot, but you can get away with just a couple metallic paints
because really metallics are really nice to use washes with. So with one gold bottle of paint, you can get, you know, 6 or 7 different variants of color. So I used Dark Hoth Flesh Contrast because it has a very nice warmish brown kind of maroon. And so I hit that with the on top of the gold there. And then now I'm just going back with my bright gold and hitting the highlights. So now I'm jumping back to my silver metallics. And again, just trying to hit these raised surfaces. I must have done it off camera, but I did a little dry brushing, it looks like, on all of the black parts. So what I do there is I think I used Wraithbone white, or any white would work just fine. And you just want to hit it with the dry brush going in one direction. That way the metallic paints will sit a little bit nicer on top of the surface, and you have to use a lot less metallics to bring up the gradient. So each of those edges just had a little bit of white underneath them, and that automatically just brings them up. So, and again with the chains, I'm just hitting basically where the light is going to be hitting them. I'm also planning to use some rust effects with my oils on some of these chains. I really enjoy bringing as many different kind of textures that I can to a model, especially of this size. So adding rust kind of gives it a little more realism, because, you know, he's giant. It's not like he cares too much about maintaining his armor or his weapons or his chains. So I put a lot of rust on the chains near the end of the video. Actually, they might be on a portion that didn't make it into the edit. But as I'm doing this, I'm always thinking about, you know, where the water would coagulate or, you know, drip down on a surface, anything that's steel, and where that would tarnish the most. So generally weapons don't rust because they're being used, they're being rubbed, they're being hacked at, they're being held. So generally rust won't be there, but on things like the chains and whatnot, one rainfall and all of those would be rusty. So now just going back in to bring back some of these skulls, I'm using just Wraithbone white. That's my favorite color to use. Bringing in those colors, just blocking in a couple of these details that I missed, trying to get these arms as ready as I can to then hopefully put onto the model. So just doing a quick little metallics on here. You can see the full process right there. Hit it with the black, then hit it with my metallics, and then I hit it with my contrast. And that's pretty much done. Maybe you might highlight it again with the metallic paint. But yeah, that arm is looking pretty good. And a lot of the tones you're seeing here look really flat. The reason that they're flat and there's not much gradient or contrast in them yet is I'm planning to do most of all of the cloth and leather and even some of the skin tone with my oil wash. So I'm not too worried about doing the highlights on those areas yet. I did do some dry brushing, so on the back of his leg there you can see the stitching really well. And the dry brushing is a really quick and easy method to kind of do between your mid-tone and your highlights. Very fast and easy. I like to do a dry brush right before a wash. So sometimes if you use a dry brush method to get your highlights completely placed in, it'll get kind of an ashy or kind of snowy effect on those items. Like you can see on his belt buckle here that it looks really ashy, and that's because I dry brush it, but I'm planning to put more paint on those brighter areas. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to end up tinting all of those raised surfaces to be a highlight mid-tone from my original mid-tone. So it's a quick and easy way to get fast gradients with a brush. So, and when you're using an airbrush, it's really like cheating because you can get really easy and fast results with an airbrush, but it's not necessary. Usually I prefer just brush painting completely. All of these methods you can use to get that same airbrush level quality, just with a couple extra steps and a little bit more time. Arguably with a finer finish though, you can be a lot more accurate with a brush. So again, I'm just going through here and popping in my metallics just on the raised surfaces where I've dry brushed. Basically where you see anything that's white edge, it's from that dry brush. So coming in with the golds again, gonna do the same process. Do his face gold as well. Really enjoyed painting his helmet. It was very fun. Beautifully sculpted model. It's really easy to paint a well-made model. It's really hard to paint a model with low resolution or low details because you then have to start getting creative and painting in those details yourself. As a miniatures painter, we are not trying to paint like it's a canvas. We are using the surfaces and the 3 dimensions to paint. I think it's a common misconception, but a lot of people think that we paint as if it was a canvas, and if you can kind of reduce the amount of times that you are painting details in and instead just focus on edges, raised surfaces, and the textures, I find that you get a really good result with a lot less work. So a lot of these tips and tricks, the way I paint, is basically how to treat different materials and different surfaces and different textures, all in the same way, just with different variants in color. If you saw how I did the metallics, it's pretty much the same how I do any other material, including the skin. I always start with my midtone, and then I bring in my shadows and my highlights. That's the name of the game. And the way to do it is just find the easiest way. So I finally figured out I had to print off the tusks. So we're getting those prepped. This is a real quick and dirty blocking in of colors. I'm leaving the black of the primer on what I want to be metallic. And so I'm just basically blocking in my bone color with Wraithbone White and bringing in my gray midtone for my runes. So quick and simple, just trying to get these nice and opaque and then getting them glued on. So big tip here, never glue surfaces paint to paint. Always scratch off that paint. No matter what, you won't get a nice glued surface unless it's plastic to plastic, and especially with resin. Resin doesn't necessarily have a chemical bond like you would use with the different Citadel paints or Citadel glues with their plastic models. Now with those glued on, you can kind of see I took a moment to look at the model. Kind of always want to be planning ahead. Always kind of take a second to look back, plan your next steps. A lot of painting comes down to forethought. The more forethought you have, the better the result. A paint plan, if you will. And that way you can kind of attack different areas all at the same time, try and save time by hitting similar areas. So we're working on the mouth here. I really enjoy painting faces and whatnot. This one is mostly covered, and a lot of the work I put into it was hidden by the glow effects. But what I'm using here is a couple different contrast paints. Nazgrin yellow here to get that yellowy paint, and then a little bit of brown. I imagine he's not a very clean eater, right? So just trying my best to kind of stain the beard near his mouth, just with a little bit of undertone. So you'll see me kind of go back and forth here, kind of adding undertone, adding in shadow, then bringing back the midtone, and then bringing back the highlight. So just going back and forth here. You can always go back and forth. I feel like a lot of people think painting is one and done. And if you water down your paints enough where they are opaque when they go on, but translucent enough that you still have to do layers, you can get quite a lot of layers on before you get a kind of a textured paint effect where it looks globby. That you want to avoid. So the better practice is to always kind of just water it down. I do mostly glazing, if not kind of a base. So whenever I'm blocking in my colors, I make sure I have a little bit of pigment. You can kind of see that on my wet palette, that the center of the paint is at its most opaque, and around it, it's a little watery. That's kind of what I'm going for. Just because Citadel bottles come with a little stopper and a little dropper kind of thing, doesn't mean you have to play by their rules. You can add liquid to them to water them down a little bit and make them easier to work with. And I've actually added paint to them before if they got a little too watery. So my contrast paint, my Basculin Gray, I've used a ton of. And so I've added black into it and a little bit of white and then some water, and I kind of made my own contrast paint. So, and then here you can see I went a little more heavy-handed on the metallics here, but the reason being is the light is catching that completely. So I hit them quite heavily because I wanted a lot of that to be gold, right where the light's catching. And then later on, I added a little bit of contrast. So right here, you can see how I differentiate the materials by using contrast paints or, different washes to just kind of change the tone of these different wood surfaces and leather surfaces. So variance is very important, or else the whole model will kind of look muddled. So to make sure that each one of those details doesn't get lost in just another, if you do all the leathers and the woods the same color, lost in the same kind of blob. So, and right here you can see that I'm adding in some contrast. Oh, and this is how I dry brush. So what we're doing here is we're adding just a little bit of paint to the brush, and then you really want to beat the hell out of it. I mean, I think a lot of people don't know dry brushing the correct way, but you want it to be dry. I didn't know that when I first started, and I kept dry brushing and just ruining models right and left because it was leaving way too much behind. The idea here is you want to have just enough paint on there that not after one swipe, but after like 4 or 5 swipes, it'll actually stay on the model. So just did a little more dry brushing to, again, give me, honestly, they're nice. With dry brushing, it's a good target, right? So it'll show me where those raised edges are, so then I can add on paints later. So here we go again, just gluing on the remaining items on this model. So he's finally put together. And we come to one of my favorite portions of painting, and that is using my oils. So oils are a fantastic medium. And generally with mini painting, we're all told to avoid oils, and they are just such a good tool that you should definitely try them. And they're pretty cheap. I use Windsor, or sorry, not Windsor, yeah, Windsor and Newton Winton oil colors. So all I have is a brown, a black, and a white, and then I have some really cheap oils of just different colors and shades. And what you do is you take mineral spirit or lacquer or white spirit or whatever they're called from wherever you're from, and you basically treat that as your water. So you're going to treat them just like you would acrylics, where you can water them down to the consistency that you want and then use them. So what you're seeing me do right now is I am adding kind of a reddish brown wash to all of the surfaces on that are flesh tones, and then anything that was kind of cloth or leather or this fur, you've seen me add in brown. So, and what I like about using oils with is you can remove them. That is the key reason I use them instead of acrylic. So they basically come in with a built-in eraser, right? So you can really just slather this on. I mean, you see how heavy-handed I'm going. So I'm just getting this all over anything that I want to be that color. So the bones, the ropes, the furs, the leathers, I'm just smothering all of it in oil. Now with oils, there is a bit of a drying time with them.
I use a hair dryer in between these washes just to kind of get them to set a little bit quicker. If you do wait too long, like probably 72 hours or so, it's pretty hard to get them off. So what you're seeing here is now I'm using the mineral spirits on a Q-tip to just remove the excess oils, and I'm trying my best just to hit the raised surfaces. So using it as an eraser tool. So you can see I'm just taking off that extra oil wash right now, and it's how I get those really nice gradients with really little work, you know. You saw how flat the cloth was on the staff right before this, and it's really coming out real nicely. Same thing with the ropes and whatnot. So I'm just going to go through here and use about 1 billion Q-tips and remove all those. You can also use a makeup brush or a makeup sponge to remove oil paints. Pretty much anything with a nice soft tip, and just soak it up with the mineral spirits and just start removing them. So here I'm going with another layer of wash, and I'm doing the same thing. Most of the finish on this model is just going in with an oil wash and then coming back and hitting it again with the mineral spirit Q-tips to remove the excess and allow that contrast to kind of go in between surfaces and make sure I'm getting as much pop as I can. So I'm not working real too hard. This is a really fun portion of the model. It really helps to tie everything together. So I like to use basically the same color of wash through the entire mini. I use brown for the metallics and the leathers, and then I'll use a warm brown for the flesh tones. But you just kind of want to match the coolness of the warmth or the coolness of the colors when you're doing a wash like this. So if I was to do a oil wash on the axe, I would just do kind of a bluish black wash, but I felt pretty happy with how the airbrush turned out on it. So I didn't feel the need to do another wash on it. But as you can see, that's my oil tray there. I'm just kind of mixing up more flesh tone, and you can see how watered down that is, right? So it's basically the same consistency as a wash. You just do the same thing. And I just slather it everywhere. There's no real skill to this. You just really send it. How I paint, I like to think, is mainly just all techniques based and proper use of color and light. So I'm still a student in a lot of these areas with using proper glow effects and OSL, which is called Object Source Lighting. I've ruined a lot of models trying to do it, getting a little better here and there. Using color correctly is also very important. You want to use like a color swatch when you get started. I did that for some time. I still do it from time to time. With a color swatch, you can go find a million different generators online, or even just ask ChatGPT, and you can pick a color that you want and maybe another color, and then ask it to generate a color swatch with complementary colors that'll really give you a tone to your model. So putting purple right next to, yellow isn't a move I would do. Certainly those are two very strong colors, but purple next to a pink or purple next to an orange would work very nicely. So using color effectively to try and make things as realistic as possible is my goal, along with, again, bringing as much contrast as I can into each of my paintings. Like this one, I'm making sure to leave a lot of that wash in the recesses and kind of underneath the arms and underneath the chest, and make sure that it stays nice and dark there. And then I'm using the Q-tip to just take off anything extra. This also helps with blending the model. Ooh, and here, what you're seeing me do is actually use oils to do kind of a highlight. So what's nice about this, I don't do it too often, but you can just put oils right out of the jar, right onto the model. And what's nice is you can take a soft brush and brush it in. So you'll see that I wanted to brighten up those whole areas. And what's nice about this is oils naturally want to blend into the surface around it. And it'll just go on real nice, and it'll just brighten those areas up real softly, and it'll automatically blend in. So what's also nice about using oils as a highlight is, again, if I put too much on, which I actually did, so you see me taking the Q-tip and I'm just getting rid of it. So I am thinking about doing a model here soon that's just pure oils, but we'll see if I actually get there. I do like them as a tool for finishing. As you can see, the model right there, it has a lot of depth to it, a lot of variance, a lot of really strong mid tones and low tones. So really the only thing that's left is bringing back my highlights. So again, I'm doing my favorite thing. It really is my favorite thing, is just going through the model and just picking up these little raised surfaces. They're so much fun. It really just comes down to trying your best to just hit those raised edges. Just taking your time and really enjoying it. And you'll see me bounce around everywhere because I get excited to reintroduce those highlights. So, and then the ropes, I really enjoyed painting the ropes. Hitting all those little raised surfaces with a little crosshatch kind of style really was fun. It's even better now that that wash has really hit the recesses, that you can see those ropes really coming out. And it's the little details. If you can really spend a little extra time on them, it'll make the whole just that much better. So you'll see me go through here and just highlight all the ropes and furs and bones and anything that I feel that this nice warm white I'm using needs. So mainly going to be the materials that are cloth like, or even kind of a soft leather. And I'll also probably hit the skulls and probably the tips of the bones as well. So again, talking about my procedure in painting, is there's a lot of back and forth. You don't ever have to go back and forth. You can be happy with the first go but I'm willing to just go back and try it again, which I think is something that as painters we struggle with, not wanting to redo something over and over again, but I certainly don't mind it. So just highlighting the furs there. In the future, I think I might do a whole video just on oil washes, and probably another video on dry brushing and highlighting, because I feel that's the main way I paint. So blocking in the color, anyone can do. It's super easy. It really takes patience to do it properly. And like I said, a lot of these results that I'm getting is just from spending so much time blocking in the colors and getting the foundation set. Once the colors are blocked in, you really can just have fun playing, right? You can go back and forth as much as you want. So a lot of these surfaces I haven't really even touched since the blocking in period. So like, for instance, the wood on the staff, I really didn't do much for that. I believe most of that was done by just the oil wash. So that's another, reason I really like oil washes, is they do a lot of the heavy lifting. They do a lot of the hard work. So just going through and just doing more highlights, just trying to grab what I find to be interesting or neat, or what I'd like the eye to catch more. Going through each one of these little furs here, and I'll hit the ropes and the edges, just trying to make the model as interesting as possible. So nothing crazy here, just a lot of patience, a lot of just little bits of paint. Another trick is to not use a small brush. You can see there that brush is pretty healthy. It has a nice round body, so I like to use a round body with a sharp tip. The reason being is when you're painting high detail, you do not want the paint to dry on the tip of the brush. So having a fat-bellied brush allows for water to mix with the paint and maintain inside the brush, and almost works like a pen to kind of wick to the surface through the tip. And I bring that up because I used to paint with an itty-bitty brush because I thought I'm painting itty-bitty things. Well, the paint would constantly dry on the tip, like instantaneously. It would come off of the wet palette, and I'd go to the miniature, and it would just already be stiffened, and it was really hard to get anything done because I was fighting a chunk of paint on the tip. And not only that, I was going back and forth between the wet palette and to the model. So I really recommend using a nice fat-bellied brush. Nothing massive, but also not too small. You can get just as detailed results. It's really just based on the tip. And as you can see, I don't really go back and forth too much against the wet palette to the model. One loading of the brush lasts me quite a while. It's also really important. I don't paint on my finger. Like you'll see a lot of painters do that to check the gradient or the opacity of their paint. I don't find it to be too necessary. I kind of know what the paint will do when it hits the surface, but I do like to dab it on a paper towel if I feel it's a little too liquidy. Or I'll touch up part of the model that I'm not too worried about, extra paint or not enough paint hitting. So that's just how I do my brush work, is with a nice semi-opacity, semi-liquid paint. So you can see here, I'm just kind of going through trying to edge highlight those runes. Unfortunately, I did kind of the very final stuff off of camera where I did my OSL and glow effects. I really do apologize. To be quite honest, I've just been kind of streaming into the ether, and at this point of the project, I felt a little disappointed. No one was really watching, and so I kind of turned off the camera just to finish the details because I couldn't be bothered to have a camera in front of my face as I was finishing things off, which I do regret. But I will be coming out with another video showing how I did the OSL. I like to use my oil paints and then just my airbrush, and it's quite simple process, and I hope you'll forgive me for this one. But this model is just about done. Really, the only thing I didn't do was varnish it, and again, those OSL glow effects. So if you watch my next video, I will make sure to have a whole portion on just the glowing side of painting. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. The way I got the axe super shiny is I used a high gloss varnish, and the rest of the model just has a matte varnish on it. But if you made it this far, I really do appreciate you following along, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I sure enjoyed painting him, and I'm really happy to see the reception I've had from my very first model on my channel. So thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.